Welcome to the Tales of Osteopathy students with me, Chelsea, and my good friend V. How you doing, V?
I'm really good. I'm really excited. I've already messed up just beginning this. I couldn't even clap in time with Chelsea to start the audio, so we're off to a good start.
You're just feeling giddy, super giddy.
I am giddy. I'm excited to see Chelsea's face on our little whereby chats. And it was her birthday this week, so woohoo!
It was my birthday! The big 3-2. 32. And what I've been doing all week is I've been, kind of appropriating Taylor Swift by going, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling 32. Everything's going to be all right. Just, over-exaggerate that I'm 10 years older than this song is.
Oh God, don't think like that. Just ignore it. That's the best way to do anything. Avoidance is key. What you got for your snacks and drinks today?
So I've gone traditional Chelsea today. Mm-hmm. Traditional Chelsea with my tea, which is my masala chai, pint of masala chai tea. So because, I'm really into this stuff, I make my own blend of masala chai. So if you want to do it at home, I would recommend, because you can make it exactly how you like. Just get a pot, just get some loose leaf tea, chuck it in a jar, a couple of cinnamon sticks, some whole nutmeg, cardamom pods, whole cloves, and black peppercorns. Leave it for a couple of weeks, give it a little shake every now and then.
Oh, a couple of weeks.
Just making sure it all infuses, you know what I mean?
Little fermentation action.
It's very, very nice, very good. Do you want to know a fun fact?
Tell me.
So people say chai tea and stuff like you get a chai tea latte. So chai actually means tea, so you're just saying tea.
Oh no. Okay, well it's a good thing to know. Next time I make it, I'll make sure to tell all of my family and they'll be like, oh God, shut up. But I love it.
Yeah, that's generally the reaction I get to things like that. It's like, oh, Chelsea. Audible eye roll.
Yeah, my little brother's great at those.
Nice. What have you got for your tea and snacks?
Well, I've actually just got a healthy little smoothie, which is inspired by the medical story I'll be telling later. It's my version of a health tonic. And it's got all homegrown stuff in it. So I've got some chard in there. Didn't have any bananas, so you can use courgettes instead. Doesn't taste of courgettes, don't worry. And got loads of fruit. So I'm all good.
Very nice. You can use courgettes in place of banana.
Yeah, you can. And they literally don't have any flavour as well in the smoothie, especially when you have fruit in there.
This is very exciting news because I can't eat bananas.
Yeah, I remember.
Very exciting.
Noted.
Keeping that in the brain bank. For sure. Have you got snacks today though?
I've got no snacks because I've literally got a pint of this smoothie, so I'm all good.
Fair enough. It's essentially a meal, isn't it?
Yeah. I would rather have Guinness, which is also like a meal in a glass, but
literally
smoothie will do.
You love a Guinness.
I fucking love Guinness so much. I feel like I should have been Irish because I've got naturally red hair as well. So, but it's just taken from me, and I'm just some Kentish girl, for fuck's sake. So uninteresting.
Okay, so what even is osteopathy?
That's so common. The amounts of times Chelsea and I know how often people have been like, I don't even know how to pronounce the word osteopathy. And it's like, yep, the subject is as complex as how to pronounce the word.
Oh, absolutely. I've got quite a nice little definition that I like to use when people are like, Chelsea, what is this thing that you're studying? So I normally say that osteopathy is a way of healing the body without medication or surgery. So it's a non-invasive practice.
Yeah, that's what I think I love about it the most, is that when you either get treated by an osteopath or you hear about it. Often people have gone to multiple different practitioners before, and they've had whatever their condition is, they've had like drugs that prescribed to them, they've had surgeries that they have said like this will be necessary to treat this and all of that sort of stuff. And osteopaths really, they want to have a look at the whole of you, have a holistic approach, which doesn't mean they're waving like a sage stick around you in a circle. They're looking at like a biopsychosocial aspect to your care, which means a biological, psychological, social aspect. So they're looking at your body's structure.
Yeah.
They're looking at your psychological health, so your mental health and your mental well-being, and you're looking at your social circumstances. So how do all three of these interconnect and affect each other? And they take that into account when they're treating you.
Yeah, for sure. So I thought it could be quite good for us to go through the GIOSC definition of osteopathy as well.
And what's GIOSC again?
So the
for our listeners?
Yes. The GIOSC is the General Osteopathic Council. So they're essentially the regulatory authority for osteopathy. So they're not there to kind of support osteopaths. They're there is to keep us in check and making sure we're doing everything we need to do. And also the title osteopathy is regulated by law in the UK. So you have to have gone through very specific training, an approved course in order to become an osteopath. It also means that, our education doesn't just stop once we've done our course and we've graduated. We have to do something called Continue Professional Development, or CPD, every single year to make sure we're staying up to date with everything that's going on. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but science seems to change a lot.
It does indeed.
Someone's like, oh yeah, this is now no longer called this. It's called this instead. Yeah. So it's really important for us to make sure we stay up to date with all of that, and we need an authority to keep us in check and make sure we're doing our jobs properly, and to support you as a patient as well.
Yeah, safeguarding our patients as well. And it means that when you're looking for an osteopath, and you want to make sure that they're legitimate and they're safe, and they're registered, that you can search on the register for osteopaths near you, and they will be on that register to assure you that they've gone through the accredited training programs, they've got a degree in osteopathy, and they are going to be safety checked essentially by GIOSC as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So their definition of osteopathy is a system of diagnosis and treatment for a wide range of medical conditions. It works with the structure and function of the body and is based on the principle that well-being of an individual depends on the skeleton, muscles, ligaments, and connective tissues functioning smoothly together. So I thought we could pull out a few things from that statement so we can talk about it in a bit more. First of all, being diagnosis and treatment. So one thing that's really interesting that some people don't realise is that osteopaths have the knowledge and skills to be able to diagnose conditions. So it isn't just the fact of, oh, I've got this thing, I'm going to go and see an osteopath for treatment. They can diagnose you. So if you've got all these weird symptoms, like you're generally not feeling well, you've got these weird headaches, your back hurts and stuff, you can go and see an osteopath. They can actually give you a full diagnosis.
Yes, it's super, super important as well, that as part of our training and what we'll be discussing in the podcast is osteopaths' knowledge of anatomy and physiology is key to everything that we do. We are held to incredibly high standards for how in detail we know our anatomy and physiology. As like last year in the full-time course that I did for a year, one of my anatomy teachers also has previously taught medicine students, and he says that osteopathy is on par with medicine students. And I've talked to previous colleagues and friends who are nurses as well, and osteopaths have more in-depth knowledge of anatomy and physiology and the requirement to know more than nurses as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the part where we're talking about structure and function. So it works with the structure and function of the body. That is anatomy and physiology, essentially. So anatomy being the structure, how something is shaped and structured, and function being what it does, physiology.
Yeah, exactly. So when, say, if you go into your first consultation with an osteopath, you've never been treated before, you might be confused as to why this consultation is so long and why your osteopath is asking you so many questions. And this is all because they're looking for links between strunction. I see.
You've
Just
combined
mix it in there. Yeah,
Strunction.
strunction. I love it. Structure and function, to you people who don't understand my blabbering, is what they're looking for and why they're asking you about not just the symptoms you've come in to talk to them about. It's not like a GP where you would just go in, you've got 10 minutes to state your claim on like, this is the things that I'm having difficulty with. And your GP's like, right, I'll address one of those issues, go see somebody else or book another appointment to discuss those. You're going to discuss all of your symptoms, and your osteopath is going to ask you a really, really in-depth background of your history of medical conditions. They're going to see how medically fit you are at that point. They're going to assess you visually. They're going to assess you and physically. So they're going to get you to do exercises and movements to see how you move. And they're going to ask you weird questions you might think about things like your stool. So like what your bowel movements are like normally, because that's a huge indication to how healthy a person is.
Yeah, absolutely. Just general waste production just shows how everything is functioning in the body. So if your waste is healthy, so we're talking about stool, urine, sweat, if that's all healthy, then it shows the product where it's coming from is functioning properly. So it's really important for us to kind of be aware of, all those bodily functions that no one ever likes to talk about. But hey, get used to it, guys, because everyone does it.
Yeah, let's normalize poop. Come on, we all do it. We all love to talk about it with our siblings or our friends and sort of giggle like, oh, this person farted on the train, that whole thing. But we do need to normalize it, because you could be missing out on something that like actually is a issue for you personally or for somebody else.
Yeah, for sure. The other bit of that definition that I think is worth pulling out is connective tissues. Because connective tissues is a little bit of a, what even is that? What are connective tissues? Essentially, it's anything that connects to anything else in the body. So blood is a connective tissue. Bone is a connective tissue. Cartilage is a connective tissue. So we've got all these different things that, connect one thing where things are flowing from one to another. The other one being lymph being a connective tissue. It's not just MSK. It's not just MSK being musculoskeletal. It is about a huge wider range of things that are happening within the body.
Yeah. And the links to how something that you might think is irrelevant to what your symptoms are or how you're feeling is hugely important to osteopaths, because we really do believe in principles like the rule of artery and the rule of the nerve, which rule of the nerve is similar to chiropractors. They believe that osteopathic or chiropractic treatment responds well to certain conditions because there's been an imbalance or a blockage in the flow of blood or for nerve impulses. Especially for chiropractors, they do the released impingement on nerves that pass through the intervertebral foramina in the spine, is why they work so specifically on the back, and how, for example, for osteopaths, we really encourage blood flow, especially, and flow of lymph and all of that sort of stuff, which is why we work on joints.
Absolutely. I just thought of an interesting point. Maybe we should explain what lymph is, because loads of people don't know what lymph is.
Yeah, I didn't know what lymph was before I did osteopathy.
Lymph, essentially what they are is they're tiny little pixie-like creatures that fly around your body. I just think it sounds like that.
It does.
Like nymph.
It does, doesn't it?
Lymph is essentially like your waste disposal. So if you think about arteries and where they carry oxygenated blood as well as nutrients to all of your cells, the veins carry back deoxygenated blood from the cells to go back towards the heart to get reoxygenated again. And the lymph carries back the waste. So you've got one thing carrying everything to the cells, that's the veins, and two things carrying everything back. And so with that, obviously, your veins and your arteries, they've got a big old pump that's helping them out, which is called the heart, which we obviously all know about.
Oh wow, the heart, is that what it does?
Yeah. Oh yeah, big deal, the heart. Lymph doesn't have a pump. It's our second circulatory system, and it doesn't have a pump. So sometimes it needs a little extra bit of help to get everything back, especially from the legs. So sometimes you'll see people that have got swollen ankles and swollen feet and things. That is the lymph not being able to get back up the body. One thing that's really important for that is being active and walking, because we've got a little pump essentially in the back of our heel that helps the lymph travel back up. So if you're sat down all day, every single day, you're not utilizing that part, and it's important to get that back to making sure you're getting all of that waste up and out of the body.
Yeah. And this is why it's like so important to check yourself. So for women and for men, you get breast cancer. And one of the indicators for breast cancer is lumps in your axillary area, which is to the side of your breast tissue and underneath in your armpits. And those are your axillary lymph nodes, and they become swollen when all the bad guys in your body are trying to be filtered through, but the lymph can't manage to filter through the really bad guys. So it's so important to check yourself to make sure. And that's one of the jobs of the lymphatic system.
Absolutely. Super important. Get rid of that waste. Get it out.
Hell yeah.
We've thrown in a little bit of anatomy for good measure there.
I know, look at me using a bit of anatomy knowledge and lingo. We've got one very, very important person to talk about when we're talking about osteopathy, and that is A.T. Still.
Very important human.
Yeah. Do you want to tell us about A.T. Still, Chelsea?
A.T. Still, Andrew Taylor Still, the father, the birther, the founder of osteopathy. It's like I'm introducing him for an award or something.
Come on!
Welcome. The way I like to kind of summarize and incredibly simplify A.T. Still's creation of osteopathy. He was a doctor, he was a surgeon, and it was around the time that all these different treatments like arsenic, opium, bloodletting, and things like that were all being used, where in reality more people died than were cured. And he was kind of witnessing it after his training and everything, and was kind of like, got to be a better way than this. It has to be a better way. So which is where he did loads of study, went really deep into anatomy and what is the body, and created osteopathy.
Yeah, he's a very, very impressive person. He's got an autobiography, which you can read, and I highly recommend. And I haven't read through it all yet, but from some of the key elements, it seems to be that he, after a lot of his training, some of his family members actually passed away from conditions which he thought could be treated. And he was in a huge bout of depression for many years, and sort of pursued avenues which inevitably ended up him getting to osteopathy to try to find cures for people which were not available at the time.
Indeed. Have you got any fun facts about Mr. Still? I say Dr. Still, probably.
He was a army surgeon, wasn't he, at the time where it was civil war in America, which I don't know a huge amount of detail in. But he happened to be walking by when somebody, like a big crowd, had gathered around this man who'd fallen off his horse. And he'd done something to his neck where, like, his vertebrae had, like, gone slightly out of line, or he'd, like, broken something off in his neck or something like that. And they were literally, like, digging his grave next to where he fell and, like, ready to roll him in when he was still alive, but obviously in excruciating amounts of pain. And they were probably like, oh, sorry, Jim, sorry about this, bit inconvenient, I know, but we're just going to roll you into your grave and that's that. Because at the time, that would have been like your killing blow. Nobody can look after you. You can't provide for yourself or your family. That whole thing. And he's like,
fucking horrifying.
Yeah, isn't it? And A.T. Still is like, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, but this man is not dying and I can help him, please. So A.T. Still manipulates, I'm pretty sure he like manipulated the muscles and tissue and the bones like back into place, and obviously lots of rehabilitation for this poor fellow who fell off the horse. But he's like, you don't need to die from these things. You can actually survive and not in a debilitating state for the rest of your life. You can thrive after this as well. So he just believed in a much more positive outlook and took a lot of inspiration from different cultures, treatments and medical uses for different things as well. I heard he took a lot of inspiration from Aztecs' theory about heliotherapy, which we know as English people especially, about the power over how the weather affects our mood, because we all love to have a moan, don't we, about how shit the weather is.
Oh, we do.
Oh yeah. And AT still was like, yeah, this heliotherapy thing is legit. Please stop spending all of your time inside because you think being pale is the glamorous thing to do. You need to be outside to gain these benefits from being in the sun. So it's really interesting.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And I'm sure we'll have many more stories about AT still throughout this podcast as well.
Yeah, for sure. Like little snippets of his wonderful mind. Imagine having your grave being dug next to you whilst you were in pain, and someone being like, sorry mate, we're just going to roll you in because we've got shit to do, you know, clocks are ticking.
Yeah, just taking like one look and being like, that's a hopeless case, there's nothing I can do for you. I'll dig your grave though, so don't worry.
Dark.
Yeah, really, really dark.
The big question, V, the big old question that everyone wants to know the answer to. I know it's been keeping you all up at night for, I imagine, years. But what is the difference between a chiropractor, a physio, and an osteo? And this isn't a joke, I promise. It does sound like the start of a joke. It's like a chiropractor, a physiotherapist, and osteopath work into a bar. I'm sure they have at some point.
Yeah, I'm sure.
But essentially, we want to look at what is the difference between the three.
Yeah, one of our lovely listeners has already sent us a message to ask about this because he's going to start his osteopathy degree in September, so good luck to you.
Woo!
And it's a really good question because both Chelsea and I have previously worked with physiotherapists and thought that that was something that we'd be interested in working in. And I've had previous experience being treated by a chiropractor and an osteopath, which I much preferred an osteopath, but my mum has been treated by both and she much preferred a chiropractor. So it's interesting that all people's experiences with all of these practitioners are all different. And please don't just give like one experience with one practitioner and let that be your blanket experience for the whole of that profession, because we all treat extremely differently, even within the same professions. Osteopaths all treat very differently, chiropractors do, physiotherapists do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also important to remember that osteopaths in the UK are very different to osteopaths in America, because in the United States you have to have an MD before you can train as an osteopath. So they are also registered doctors and then train as osteopaths afterwards. So it's slightly different. So bearing on each country as well, you're going to have different kind of regulations and different meanings. So we're talking specifically about the UK at the moment, which is going to be similar in some aspects to different places, but at the moment we're specifically talking about the UK. And I think the first thing that's important to understand the difference between the three of them is in terms of diagnosis. So an osteopath and a chiropractor both have the ability to diagnose conditions and put together treatment plans. Physiotherapists, on the other hand, do not diagnose, they are treaters. So you would go to a physiotherapist to receive your treatment. So for example, you might have been diagnosed with a condition, or you've just had surgery or something like that, and a GP or your surgeon or whoever will refer you to a physio or a physical therapist in order to rehab you and help manage that condition. So physiotherapists are not able to diagnose. They obviously still do have an incredible knowledge about the body, and they might be able to highlight something based on their experience and refer you to someone in order to go and get diagnosed.
Yeah. And you had a very good, simple explanation summary that you told me a while ago about the key difference between the three professions.
So this is something that I was told by a sports therapist, actually. So not even one of the three, so someone on slightly the outside. the way that they look at it is, so first of all, a chiropractor, their whole ethos is around everything stems from the spine. So all kind of illnesses, conditions, anything that's going wrong with the body stems from the spine, which is why all their focus on manipulations are through the spine. And this explanation that was given to me is that chiropractors work from the inside out. Physiotherapists, focusing on soft tissue and things, work from the outside in. Osteopaths look at the whole body as one unit together. So that's kind of a really simple summary of the difference between the three of them.
Yeah, I think as well, it's quite difficult to explain to just any person who's asking as well, because there are so many overlapping factors to the three professions as well. Like we use very similar techniques, especially with massage and joint manipulation and everything like that. It is very similar, but there are some different diagnostic and additional tools that both chiropractors, physiotherapists and osteopaths use. Chiropractors are commonly known for using diagnostic tools such as x-rays and MRIs and CT scans alongside of their treatment so that they can see with the vertebrae as part of the spine if there are any misalignments or anything like that. And physiotherapists are well known for using electrotherapy, hydrotherapy, TENS machines such as that in their practice as well.
And osteopaths, we just use our hands to just touch things and do that stuff. Obviously, you know, we do kind of sometimes refer to MRIs and things and stuff that the patients have, but we're all about palpation. Touching the things and seeing how they feel.
Yeah. And although we all want the same aim and stuff like that, and we're all aiming to help people in different ways, we'll all offer different advice as well.
Yeah, for sure.
So we all will offer advice on posture and exercise and things like that, but all three professions can have additional training outside of university in different techniques and treatments such as cupping and acupuncture and all of those sorts of things that we will go into further detail in later episodes.
Yeah, we always love to talk about kind of complementary therapies and alternative therapies, because the main thing that we all want as practitioners is for you to feel good. So if this stuff makes you feel good, amazing, great, keep doing it. Do you know what the difference is between complementary therapy and alternative therapy?
No, tell me.
Nothing, essentially.
Oh.
So it's the same. So it's not like these are classed as complementary therapies, these are classed as alternative therapies. It's if you are receiving that treatment with traditional medicine or not. So if you're still seeing a GP and, you know, you're getting some acupuncture as well, that's a complementary treatment because it's complementing your existing treatment. If you're just treating your condition with acupuncture, that is an alternative therapy.
I see. That's a good way of explaining it as well. Definitely.
And the main thing is that we have the utmost respect for all kind of practitioners and anyone that's getting into any field because they literally just want to help people. Utmost respect for all of them.
Yeah, exactly. And we really, really would love if any osteopaths or physiotherapists or chiropractors who are listening, we would love to have you on as a guest to talk about your profession and your opinions and your experiences. Or if you just want to email us any interesting stories or advice, we would really appreciate that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Tell us your stories. You know, we want to all work together, share your information. Let's broaden that knowledge, guys.
Yep.
Let's broaden the knowledge of the world. Hey V.
Hello.
You got an osteopathy tale for us?
I do. I have my own osteopathy tale, which I literally this morning, because I do everything last minute apparently, only like sort of started thinking about it, and I was like, oh yeah, this is like, I don't know if it's interesting to anybody else, but I was like, it's actually been quite a long little journey. So when I was about 14 years old, I noticed that I had like a lump forming on my left arm, where the elbow crease is, which is, by the way, the elbow crease is called the cubital fossa, just for a little tidbit for you. And it was like really, really swollen and everything like that. And like for a couple of hours when I first woke up in the morning, I couldn't bend it more than 30 degrees sometimes. Wow. And I was like, this is highly inconvenient because I do have some school stuff to do, but more importantly, I've got hockey to play. So kindly, can my arm stop being a T-Rex arm? Thanks very much. And anyways, I had like a GP appointment that I booked on my own because I was living away from my parents' house. So I just booked it through the school. They were like, so you have a lump growing on your arm. And it's like 14-year-olds don't tend to have lumps growing on their arm. So I had a couple of MRIs and they were like, I don't quite know what this is. And obviously by that point I told my parents and they were like, proper like starting to panic, and they were like, they've got a lump on your arm, like it's gonna be cancer. And I was like, oh god, now I've got to decide who I give my Game Boy Color to in my will. Like, that's a really fucking hard decision to make.
That is a tough decision.
I know. I mean, I've got an older brother and a younger brother, but they might have their own. And do I leave it to my best friend? It's a very difficult decision to make when you're 13, 14 years old. And I didn't really have any other prized possessions, did I? Yeah, but ended up like after a couple of MRIs and like awkward trips to London where like my mum was getting like quite emotional, and I was like, oh god, I'm in the waiting room and people like are in the centre to see if they're tumour or something like that. It was in London. It's like a specialist place, and it turned out to be a low flow vascular malformation.
What is that, V?
It's quite a mouthy little word, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I still don't really understand why it formed at that point, and they didn't know, and they didn't have any advice to give me to help me with the pain or anything like that. They were like, the surgery's quite risky, and especially because you're so young and you're in school and stuff like that, so we're going to wait and see if it stops growing. And it did stop growing, but it was still affecting me. Like I went on like a hockey tour to South America, and I woke up in my host's house, and my Spanish was shocking at this point as well. And I was like, how do I explain that I can't move my arm? This is a little bit tricky. But anyways, fast forward a couple of years and I'm in my second year of nursing degree. And I've attached myself to the physiotherapists on the ward that I had my placement on to learn like a bit more about their job roles and like safe manual handling, because my arm lump had flared up again, because it sort of goes in and out of being swollen or not. And I'd ended up like compensating loads because I had, my left arm was weaker, I was compensating with how I was moving my back, and I was waking up in the middle of the night with back spasms and like really, really terrible back pain. And I'd already started developing a separate condition that was affecting my sleep, and essentially I had insomnia at the time as well. And they were like, you really need to go see an osteopath. Like, here's the one that I see.
Yeah.
Go and check them out. And I went and saw this osteopath, and for a couple of months, she treated me, even though she hadn't ever heard or treated anyone with a low flow vascular malformation. But she encouraged me to start journaling, to track like my exercise, my sleep, food, stress levels, and all of that sort of stuff. And when my lump was like more swollen and painful and all of that sort of stuff. And she's the first like health practitioner that I'd seen. So from the time that I was 14 to 21, 22, that had actually asked me all of these questions and had like noted down the medication I was taking. She was like, you need to note down this and that. And she also like gave me like postural advice for like my day-to-day and for work, and exercises to do, and she was massaging me and using acupuncture, and it was all going so well. And I was really like starting to understand how many elements of health there are. And it actually took me just a couple of months of going to see her and tracking my symptoms that I realised that since I was 13, I'd been on and off the contraceptive pill to control my periods. And I noticed by tracking that when I was on and off the contraceptive pill, and noting like how I'd in the past several years, like since I was a teenager, when I'd been on the pill and when I'd not, that actually when I was on the pill for longer than like 4 months, my low flow vascular malformation was much worse. And it would be like, when I couldn't bend my arm more than like 20, 30 degrees was when I'd been on the pill for that long, because obviously
No
it
way.
does. Yeah. And it's just like, if I hadn't had gone to that osteopath and she'd encouraged me to take my health into my own hands, as well as her using all of her toolkit to try and help me to figure out what was going on, I wouldn't have been able to figure out what was going on, and I'd still have this issue. So it was really, really amazing. And I still track loads of my health related issues and stuff like that, and it's helped me to like identify like intolerances to food and all of that sort of stuff. So it's so beneficial. And now I'm just like, anytime I hear anybody having like the slightest little symptom, that I'm like, I wonder if I can diagnose you in my head, like especially when I'm bartending.
Yeah.
It's attached to a sports club. So I'm watching outside and I'm watching people play. And I'm like, I bet you have this condition, or I bet you have that. And then when they're walking to the bar and I'm giving them their pints and stuff like that, I'm like, definitely. And I'm like, you need to see an osteopath. If they're like, my back's really hurting, or like, I've got this issue with like my Achilles tendon or something like that, I'm like, you should see an osteopath.
Yeah. I literally have this now with teaching yoga, where I've got, just everyone's sat at the beginning, comfortable cross-leg position, and just someone's got their head just completely central, some people to the side, and things like, you've got a problem with your neck, you've got a problem with your neck. And just like, and then you just start to see how people are sat, and it's like, you've got an anterior tilt, you've got a posterior tilt, and it's so interesting how absolutely hyper aware now of how the body is structured. You can see these tiny little things just, and it's not necessarily that there's something wrong with them, it's that that's just the way their body is. That's
abnormalities are actually normal. Every human is not the same. We're all not meant to be the same size and shape. That's what makes us so unique. Not to sound like a grandma, but we're all special in our own little ways. And abnormalities are extremely interesting and special. It's like when you're on public transport. When I'm on the tube, I must look like an absolute weirdo, because anybody who's standing up, and if I'm sitting down or standing up, I normally stand up on the tube, I'm looking like how their weight is distributed and like which leg they're favouring, and if they're like scapula are like elevated on this side and which side, and it's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also when you walk past them, they're sat at their desk and they're just like hunched down and rolled out. You just want to kind of put your hands on their shoulders and be like this. Just sit up straight.
If anybody's on their phone at the moment and their chin is almost tucked into their chest, please raise your chin and
lift that
straighten your shoulders out, because the amounts of times that I look down the carriage in the tube and every single person has got their neck cricked, and they're staring at their phone, and I'm like, please look after your neck.
Yes. Yep. Keep that chin up. Raise it proud.
Yeah. So that's my osteopathy tale.
That is awesome. It's so good that she kind of gave you the tools to manage your own health and well-being, and you became aware of the fact of, you noticed the patterns and you saw, okay, this is related to the contraceptive pill. So just to break, so what was it? It's the low flow vascular malformation.
Yeah, that's on my left arm. Which I'd actually, since I've stopped the pill for like several years now, it's stopped swelling. I've never had another painful experience with it, and it's shrunk in size as well, because I had an MRI last year.
It's really interesting. So low flow vascular malformation, so vascular being veins and arteries and stuff.
Yeah.
And malformation being there's a malformation, as in something.
Exactly that.
Something is formed that shouldn't necessarily be there. So due to like a lack of flow, in terms of the vascular area within that body, it's created like this lump essentially.
Yeah, feels like a gristly little meatball. Sounds delightful, I know.
That's such a beautiful way of putting it. So eloquently beautiful. A gristly little meatball.
Yeah, that's me. Nobody call me that if you meet me. I won't respond to that if you shout, hey, gristly little meatball.
Hey, you gristly little meatball.
I've got enough nicknames, thanks. Sophie,
I hear you've also got a gross story for us.
Yes, Yeah, I do have. It's not necessarily gross, but it's very interesting to see how people's opinions of what's beneficial to your health has changed just in the last couple hundred years, not even that. So I want to tell you about, not about my smoothie today, but about the OG, the original health tonic that was very popular. And it was used in hospitals, by the public, in religious institutions, literally everywhere. Wow. Claiming to nourish, fortify and refresh. Quote, strengthens the entire system, most agreeable, effective and lasting renovator of the vital forces. A little background. The German chemist Albert Niemann first isolated the cocaine alkaloid from coca leaves in 1859. And doctors completely embraced that shit. They were like, yeah, we're all over this. Let's use it for everything. Let's put it in throat lozenges. Let's put it in drops for toothache. Like, let's literally, cocaine is the shiz.
Hang on.
Yep.
Cocaine in throat lozenges.
Yeah.
Oh, mate.
Yeah. It's so mad now that we're thinking about it, but that's the beneficial part of hindsight, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I want to talk to you about Angelo Mariani, who in 1863, he's a Corsican chemist, big up Corsica, read Paolo Mantegazza's article on the hygienic and medicinal properties of coca, which is the coca leaves where cocaine comes from, after he visited Peru and saw the native Peruvians using it. And this inspired Mariani to create Van Mariani, a coca wine used as a health tonic.
No way.
I know. So there are two main chemical compounds in coca leaves. Sorry for the butchering of pronunciations, but they're called benzoyl ecogonine and ecogonine methyl ester, which have no psychoactive properties without a catalyst, but mixed the leaves with alcohol, in this instance a fine Bordeaux wine, and the ethanol
delicious.
in the wine acts as a solvent, extracting the cocaine from the leaves, producing coca-ethylene, creating your health tonic. So the OG homebrew for Van Mariani yielded 6 milligrams of coca-ethylene, so cocaine, per fluid ounce. But Angelo was like, I want to sell it to Americans, so I'm going to up the ante and put it to 7.2 milligrams per fluid ounce to compete with the other health tonics in America that had like things like heroin and stuff like that in, because so much fun back in the day. So it was endorsed by like thousands of doctors who were like, yeah, we're going to give it to overworked men with delicate women, because, you know, us women.
So delicate.
And sickly children, because that's the thing you do, right? So their recommendation for adults was 3 glasses a day as a little aperitif before your little brekkie in the morning, your lunch and your dinner. And then don't worry, because the kids didn't get left out. Their recommendation was half that amount. So I see what they're going for. Just a little bit of a wine cocaine juice box for little Timmy after nap time. And you're all good. And it had so many famous and like influential fans that endorsed it as well. Like Queen Victoria was on that cocaine.
Of course she was.
Yeah, what wasn't she into that fun gal? Thomas Edison, like loads of famous writers, like previous American presidents, and even Pope Leo XIII carried Van Mariani around in a little hip flask with him, which I love the idea of, just like underneath his robes. And he appeared in advertisements for it, claiming the drink helped him to fortify himself when prayer wasn't insufficient. He also awarded Mariani a Vatican Gold Medal of Appreciation for, obviously, Pope Leo's favourite juice box, which I just think is hilarious.
That is incredible.
I love it. And in 1884, so going across the pond to America, so John S. Pemberton, looking for alternatives for morphine and heroin-based tonics that they served up in pharmacies. So they actually... The original like soda shops and like seltzer and stuff like that, they sold in pharmacies, and they were like, "This okay? We'll just like add a little morphine in for you, Margaret. You'll be all right." So he copied Mariani's recipe, creating Pemberton's French wine coca. But alas, the pesky little prohibition law passed in 1886 in Georgia. And they were like, you can't have alcohol, it's okay. And he was like, oh, that's really fucking put a little stopper in that.
Yeah.
So I'll keep the cocaine, but get rid of the alcohol. And his containing the extract of the cocoa leaf and adding cola nuts, spelt with a K, for flavour and caffeine, created Coca-Cola.
Holy shit. Do you know, I knew that the name came from that, and people would say that it used to contain cocaine, but I didn't know it was literally made because of prohibition.
Yeah. So presently,
Mental.
the Coca-Cola company does not admit to ever using cocaine as in any of their original products, or coca leaf extract in their products as well. They just won't admit to any of it at all. But I'll show on social medias the pictures of their advertisement and stuff like that. But these things can't be created out of nothing or photoshopped. Like the Pope is literally like next to a picture of this bottle, and then in a couple of years' time, there's advertisements everywhere for Coca-Cola. Yeah, and that's just the start of the like horrific history of Coca-Cola. Because even the Vatican now doesn't remember supporting Van Mariani at all.
Doesn't remember. Oh, how convenient.
I know, they just don't recall it. It's never happened. So that's the interesting story of one of the most popular health tonics that the world has ever seen, and the start of Coca-Cola.
That was magic.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm feeling Philippines now that you've told me that story. What a story.
High on life, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. High on life.
You don't need any of that juice box, red wine, cocaine mix.
No, yeah, so guys, so listeners, just as a public health warning, don't go out and buy a bottle of red wine and some cocaine from your local supplier.
Yeah.
And try and make your own health tonic, because I'll tell you now, it's not healthy.
Please don't. That wasn't the point in the story. I just wanted to give you a little background on some of the interesting details of cocaine and the original Coca-Cola.
V,
Yes.
have you got a yoga related or Ayurveda related question for me?
Right, first of all, because we haven't spoken that much this week, 'cause you've been on your birthday and I've been working 9 to 5, even more than that because I work in a bar. But what have you been up to in your Ayurveda classes at the moment?
Lots of really interesting stuff actually over the last week. So, have you heard of the doshas?
I think you mentioned to me before, briefly, but tell me about them.
So essentially, the doshas are the primary functions of the human body. So you may have heard of these terms before, but not so much. You know, it's a bit more sort of fancy and flowery than the functional, process of the human body. So there are 3. So you've got vata, which is made up of the elements of space and air. You've got pitta, which is made up of the elements of fire and a little bit of water. And then you've got kapha, which is made up of the elements earth and water. So these 3 different processes within the body is like, I challenge you. In fact, my teacher said, he said, if anyone can find something that doesn't fit into one of those categories, any function in the body, he'll give you a chocolate. So he hasn't been proven wrong to this day.
Dr. Sharma, give me that chocolate.
Dr. Sharma, big shout out to Dr. Sharma. With that, any function in the body can fit into these 3 categories. So vata is about transport. Okay, so transporting anything through the body. We're talking about blood. We're talking about lymph. We're talking about nerve impulses and messages through the body. We're talking about all different types of movement. So, the moving of your muscles, all of that sort of stuff. Anything to do with transportation and movement all comes into the vata. You then got pitta. So pitta is fire and water, which is all about your metabolism.
Okay.
So the way that anything is heated within the body, so how you metabolize food, how that nutrition gets absorbed within the body. So it's not just how quickly your stomach and your digests, your small intestine breaks down food. We're talking about your liver processing that, the nutrients being, going around the body. And then we've got kapha, which is all about growth and repair. So, think about like your bones. Bones are always repairing and growing, things like that, especially as a kid, you're growing constantly, but your body and cells are renewing all of the time. So anything to do with that is all under kapha. And of course, things can go wrong inside the body. So these things can aggravate as well. So any aggravation within vata is about degeneration, okay? So thinking about the elements of space and air. You've got space and air, too much of it whizzing around your body too quickly, okay? So what illnesses are those going to create? Things like anxiety, insomnia, problems with your joints, too much space and air in the body. Yeah. Then you've got pitta. So pitta is fire, right? Okay, so what happens when you've got too much fire? Inflammation, okay? Too much heat causes inflammation. So again, anything with itis, all that sort of thing. Problems with your digestion as well. Then with kapha, too much kapha is accumulation. So, too much growth and repair. Think about what that's going to happen. Too much earth and water. You get things like obesity, cysts, cancer, all those sort of things come into that.
Wow.
So, and with that now, I see everything in doshas, like literally. Yeah. This is one thing that Dr. Sharma said to us, like, you will now see everything in doshas. Like someone will talk to me, for example, I saw my uncle last week and he was saying about the fact that, he had a clogged artery in his body, kapha aggravation, too much accumulation, things like you just start to see everything in vata, pitta, kapha. With that, we are all a makeup of all three of these doshas. Okay, and we're all dominant in one dosha or another, or maybe two doshas. So where we're predisposed to potentially, we could be more likely to have certain conditions, but it also tells you a lot more about how your body functions, and understanding your basic constitution helps support you in your quest for health, essentially. Because if you're more dominantly pitta, then you know for a fact that your body's naturally hot. So what do you not want to do? Give it more heat. So just things like that. So that's called your prakriti, essentially. So what is your constitution? And it's set from conception and birth, which is really interesting. So there's a whole effective within Ayurveda, before you conceive, there's a whole sort of detox process that you need to go through to make sure you cleanse yourself of any sort of illnesses. This is the mother and the father, to make sure they're in the perfect health, so that when they conceive the child has got the best chance of having the optimum amount of health, and that any illnesses aren't being passed down from the parents.
Wow.
It's really interesting. And then it's all to do with kind of, the mother making sure she's really happy during the pregnancy. They tell her she's got to go to loads of different festivals and decorate her house in a way that, keeps her uplifted.
Head to Glastonbury.
Yeah, literally, great times. And also, what the mother eats during pregnancy, things like that. So making sure she's creating, the best environment she can for her little life. And then, from when you're born, it sets your constitution. And then obviously as we get older, we get aggravations of things, which is where disease comes from. So for me, I am, as told by Dr. Sharma, very, very pitta with a little bit of kapha. And it's just interesting. So how you define and how you figure out what you are is based on your metabolism, on your strength. And by strength, we don't mean how much you can, weight you can pick up, like flexors muscles. It's by your endurance. And he compares it to 3 different animals. So vata essentially is like an antelope, right? So antelopes, how do they eat? They just casually graze on grass all day, eating loads of tiny little meals and just going around having a nice time. Really low endurance though, low strength. You think, they can get tired super easily. You then got pitta, which is a leopard. So think about leopards. How do they eat? They eat one fucking massive meal and then they sleep under a tree all day. Yeah. So they've got like medium endurance, right? So they've got really high appetites, can eat a super big meal, digest it quite easily. But also it's like once they do a little bit of effort, they run around for 10 minutes trying to chase down their prey. And it's just like, I've got to go and sleep under a tree because it's just too hot out here. And then kapha is elephants, right? So what are elephants? Strong as fuck. They are so strong. Beautiful creatures, ripping out trees from roots and stuff like that. super slow metabolisms, though. Really slow metabolisms, but man, have they got endurance? Have they indeed?
Walking for days.
Absolutely. So it's quite interesting when you just look at that and figure it out. And someone on my course was actually saying at one point that, because she's dominantly pitta, and she was saying that I really like lifting weights though, and like going to the gym and lifting weights. Can I still do that? And Dr. Sharma said, do you ever see leopards lifting weights? No, leave that to the elephants. I think that's it. That's a wrap.
That's a wrap. Thank you very much for listening, everybody.
Yeah.
This was so interesting. Definitely more of a chatty one, because the subjects that we're talking about, nobody has a right or wrong answer. And we're obviously students, so we're still learning and still developing our understanding of these subjects, especially with osteopathy. So please, if you have any more questions, send them in on our email, which is TOOSpodcast@gmail.com. And you can follow us on all of our social media pages, which is TOOS Podcast.
Yeah, give us a follow. Tell us your osteopathy stories. Tell us what you want to hear about. We've really loved hearing from some of you this week that have listened to the podcast and you're like really excited about it and asking us about things that you want us to talk about in the future. We had one person say, what's the difference between a chiropractor, osteo and physio? It's like, well, you are in luck, because that is our next episode. But yeah, do send us in the things you want us to talk about, because, you know, we're more than happy to get deep and involved.
Yeah, sounds good.
Thanks so much for listening, everyone, and we will see you next week.
Goodbye.